Now on BBC News, the latest from New York and around the world. Business Today.
Live from New York at the opening bell, this is Business Today. US shares opened sharply lower as investors question sky-high tech valuations. Is the AI-fueled rally finally running out of steam? Big change in the Big Apple. New Yorkers vote for their next mayor, with self-avowed Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani ahead in the polls. And facing the inevitable, UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves refuses to rule out tax rises as she warns that everyone will have to contribute to fix Britain's finances. Plus, revving up a cult classic. Iconic British motorcycle brand Norton roars back, driven by a cash injection from its Indian owner. Welcome to Business Today, live from New York. I'm Michelle Fleury, and we start here on Wall Street, where investors appear to be drawing back from the sky-high big tech valuations that have been driving record market highs. Warnings from the bosses of top banks, the likes of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, that we could be heading for something of a drawdown may be taking root, as strong results from AI leaders like software maker Palantir on Monday seemingly failed to shift the dial. So, is the AI froth finally being skimmed? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Alonso Munoz, Chief Investment Officer at Hamilton Capital Partners. Alonso, great to see you on the programme. Look, we saw yesterday sky-high valuations, OpenAI, that deal buying more compute with Amazon. Is there now a reassessment, buyer's remorse?
Michelle, good morning. Good to be here. Well, look, some of the froth is coming out of the market today, and we've had a really good year, Michelle. When you look at the S&P 500 year to date, it's up double digits. Some of the individual constituents in the index are up 20, 30, 40% plus. And so this is just normal part of markets taking a little bit of a breather as we go into the back half of this year. And we believe that the AI trade is still intact, and we look forward to seeing how this develops over the next couple of months.
And when you look at the stock market, I mean, so much of the gains have been driven by firms linked to AI. If you strip that out, how are companies doing, particularly consumer-facing companies?
Well, that's exactly right. This is a very busy market. And if you take out those top large cap or mega cap names, the market's only up 3, 4, 5% year to date, looking at the S&P 500. I think overall, if we take a step back and maybe take a 30,000-foot view, the economy is still doing okay. And that's what gives us some reassurance that this market is going to continue to power higher. And when we look at earnings, Michelle, we're in the middle of earnings season still. We're seeing some pretty positive beats both on the top and bottom line. So when we look across the spectrum, even when we go sector by sector, every sector of the S&P 500 is positive year to date. And that gives us obviously some momentum going into a historically and seasonally good part of the year as well, and that's keeping us upbeat.
Briefly, what do you think happens with the Fed in December? A lot of question marks about what they'll do next.
Well, there's a lot of back and forth when it comes to the Fed. Obviously, they cut last week, and that was the right thing to do. They really should cut in December as well. Part of the argument, Michelle, is what do they do about this labor market that has weakened and has softened a little bit against a backdrop of economic data that could start to come in a little bit worse than expected. We got ISM data yesterday that wasn't very upbeat, but overall we saw positive GDP, personal income, personal spending still up. And we're going to be watching the economic data very closely. We've been in a vacuum with the government shutdown, but there's a lot going on. It's going to keep us very busy going into year end. We still think the Fed cuts in December.
Yeah, as you say, flying blind without that economic data. Alonso Munoz, always good to chat to you, Chief Investment Officer at Hamilton Capital Partners.
Thank you.
Now, it's a big election day here in the United States, with some significant races making the headlines in New York City, New Jersey and Virginia, plus a redistricting vote in California. But it is the mayoral race right here in the Big Apple that is taking centre stage, with investors and Wall Street watching closely. It's a blockbuster race with Republican Curtis Sliwa, Independent Andrew Cuomo and Democrat Zoran Mamdani on the ballot, whom President Trump has labelled a communist. Trump now backs Cuomo and warns he'll cut federal funding if Mamdani wins. Here is President Trump speaking to our partners at CBS.
It's going to be hard for me as the president to give a lot of money to New York because if you have a communist running New York, all you're doing is wasting the money you're sending there. So I don't know that he's won, and I'm not a fan of Cuomo one way or the other, but if it's going to be between a bad Democrat and a communist, I'm going to pick the bad Democrat all the time, to be honest with you.
Well, let's bring in Henrietta Treyes, co-founder and director of economic policy at Vader Partners in Washington, D.C. You advise investors on political events. So I'm very curious to get your take on this. We've got Donald Trump there making those comments. But in some ways, Mamdani's playbook isn't that dissimilar. Populist message, disruptive, appealing to pocketbook issues. So is sort of Mamdani in some ways a kind of complete foil to what we've seen with Trump on the right?
Yes, I would definitely say that's an appropriate way to categorize all of this. For American voters, the number 1 through 3 issues are the U.S. economy, inflation, and prices. And they do not like the president's tariffs. They see grocery prices continuing to rise, electricity prices continuing to rise. And they're saying, look, we voted for Donald Trump to bring prices down, and that's not happening. So maybe we need to take an alternate route. And it's specifically salient with the under 45 and the 45-year-old and under demographic. They are very much migrating in the Mamdani direction, at least in New York City. And that is all to do with his affordability message and many of the same things that President Trump ran on. So to have Trump endorsing Cuomo, who is not as focused on those issues, presents a very stark contrast between the candidate that President Trump was on the campaign trail versus what he's delivered, and then what Mamdani is trying to sell voters on right now as well in New York.
I mean, how do you think, for people watching this show from an international perspective, to what extent should global businesses, investors care about the outcome of the New York City mayoral race, but also those other races we mentioned in Virginia and in New Jersey?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing to look at is just directionally what this means. In the last 90 years, if Democrats have swept New York, New Jersey, and the New York mayoral race and Virginia, they go on to win the House of Representatives in the following midterm election cycle, which is next November. So as we look ahead to the president's tariffs, his authority to impose those tariffs, oversight, deregulatory efforts, things along those lines, you want to be looking at what is going to be the levers of power in Washington in the back half of Trump's second term. So what this suggests in the elections and the polling data that we see right now is that Democrats lead in all 3 of those states between 6 and 16 points. So you can take the other side and sort of cross your fingers and expect for some other candidate to win. But the polling has been pretty consistent all year. The Democratic candidates are in the lead by some various margin, again, 6 to 16 points. So that suggests that we're headed into a blue wave in the 2026 midterms, which is normal. When one party has control of Washington, voters tend to migrate back in the other direction. We vote for change, but we don't really like it when we get it. So they turn back in the other way. And that's what they're going to do this time around if the elections turn out the way polling suggests right now.
And we'll have to see. Obviously, New York produced Donald Trump. We'll see whether or not Mamdani will be another sort of shock in the political circles. Henrietta Treyes, co-founder and director of economic policy at Vader Partners. Always good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves has refused to rule out tax rises in her budget later this month, warning she'll make the necessary choices on November 26. That is, despite a clear manifesto pledge by the Labour Party not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance. Speaking in Downing Street this morning, the Chancellor blamed the previous Conservative government, Brexit and global economic pressures for a situation where the country owes £2.6 trillion and is spending £1 in every 10 of taxpayers' money on debt interest. That means, she said, we will all have to contribute to fixing Britain's finances.
As I take my decisions on both tax and spend, I will do what is necessary to protect families from high inflation and interest rates, to protect our public services from a return to austerity, and to ensure that the economy that we hand down to future generations is secure, with debt under control. If we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort.
Well, the leader of the UK opposition, Conservative chief Kemi Badenoch, called the speech one long waffle bomb and a laundry list of excuses.
This morning, we saw the extraordinary spectacle of a Chancellor, just days before a budget, rushed into a panicked speech. We were told that this was the great moment when Labour would show they had a plan for growth. Instead, what we got was a masterclass in managed decline. A Chancellor claiming she was just going to set the context, but instead of clarity, business leaders are none the wiser, investors are confused, workers are anxious, because the truth is Labour doesn't have a plan to get Britain working again.
Here's City of London economist Simon French about where tax rises are likely to fall.
I think it's unlikely, given her focus on not raising inflation any further than inflation has already risen this year. I think we can rule out VAT, because VAT would pass straight through to consumer prices. So you really got only two options. You could reverse some of the employee national insurance cuts that her predecessor Jeremy Hunt introduced in his latter days as Chancellor, or far more likely, you raise income tax. And if it's done on basic rate taxpayers, that will be the first Chancellor to do that for 50 years. So pretty, at least in terms of history, pretty unprecedented territory.
Now, one for the bikers out there. For lovers of British-made motorbikes, there's one name that comes to mind: Norton Motorcycles. It's looking to use the UK's latest trade deals to sell its bikes around the world, as Norton's executive director explains.
We're a British brand. We manufacture in Solihull. There's been a huge increase in the number of jobs we have there, with very skilled engineering roles. But we're a global producer, so we have technology centres around the world. But the trade deals have actually been incredibly helpful for us in giving us stability and certainty. So our plan is to export from the UK into Europe. We're already active in 7 of the countries there: France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, growing very, very quickly, but also exporting to India, exporting to the USA. They're really beautiful to look at. The performance is incredible. Obviously, Norton's famous. Isle of Man TT wins are incredibly quick performance bikes, incredibly well handling, but also the adventures. Our founder, Pa Lansdowne, did a 3,000-mile ride in his 50s to South Africa in 1922. Che Guevara and the Motorcycle Diaries were on a Norton. So, and we're unveiling on and off-road adventure bikes today, which is pretty exciting.
And that is it from us here on Business Today.